Hi, welcome to a new episode in the Internet Surfer, hosting the most horror and creepiest stories from Reddit. Please don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy.
Serious. What's something so bizarre and unusual that's happened to you that you do not share it with many people? Episode 3.
My family is from a religion that believes in reincarnation and spirits. Was brought there for my bad behavior and family dynamics, witnessed an exorcism of my house, and they didn't dare get anywhere near my friend's house. When I was 16, like most teenagers, I was a bit much to handle at times. My relationship with my folks was kept to the minimum due to a lot of resentment and lack of conversation at home. At some point it became a bit much for everyone, and my mom decided that forcing us to go to this church would improve things. I wasn't going to fight them on that, especially because time at church meant less time studying. It wasn't an awful place either, and they had a pretty good message without being pushy, regardless of your beliefs. Well, anyways, I get there and I find out she actually signed us up to the disobsession of our family, meaning she believed we had bad spirits feeding off our energy. This constituted of a lobby where someone was constantly preaching, and a secondary room with a long table full of people around it and a moderator at the end of the table. I was never allowed in this room because I was a minor, but they would always start the session with me in there, ask me to leave, close the door, my parents would stay, and from there on it was like World War was happening in the room. Screams, chairs flying across the room, tables being turned, people crying and whining. And the moderator trying to control them. This went on for months. We'd go once a week, sit at the mass, and have 30 minutes inside the room, with other families taking turn. They basically ask you to picture yourself at the door and then walk around their houses. One of them was the basic, lot of darkness, this room is worse than that room, stay there a little longer before moving to the next one, we will cast some prayers on top of this house to bless it. The second one was a friend who was highly neglected by his father, who had a whole new family in the house and would bribe him to stay away from family activities. He was also involved with a lot of drugs and just overall lost. Once they asked me to picture myself at the entrance of his house, everyone at this table started freaking it out. Saying they were not prepared for the amount of stuff and negative things this house had, that they were going to get hurt or out of control. They were scared of being possessed, and some of them started hissing and screaming. I was quickly escorted out of the room before it all went out of control, and we were done after that session. Mom wasn't a fan of me hanging out with this friend anymore, after that night.
This memory has haunted me for over 10 years. My husband was driving and I was in the front seat about to go to sleep with my kids all buckled up in seats behind me. It wasn't really a dream, more of a feeling like someone whispering in my ear softly telling me that my youngest, only 4 at the time, was going to be really sick and was going to have his appendix removed but will be fine after a few days. It was so clear. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and that is exactly what happened. Everything from how the room looked to the surgeon to the nurses who cared for him were exactly how they were in my dream. I have had this same thing happen twice before. Both times I told my husband, who didn't believe me, so never said anything this time. I do not believe I am psychic, but it does make me wonder if there truly is a spirit or guardian angel.
I have predicted the future many times. The first time was when I was a kid at an overnight summer camp. One day we were eating lunch, and I suddenly started to feel really sad. When asked, I said, I think my dad just got hurt. The counselors didn't really think anything of it since I was just a kid and I was probably just feeling homesick. Anyway, that night the camp director called me into his office to tell me that my dad had gotten into a car accident. Okay, that's weird, but it could have just been a coincidence, right? The next time happened about a year ago in the middle of the night. I woke up suddenly and thought, my dog just died, thinking it was just a nightmare. I dismissed it, only to find that my dog had died. The most recent time I predicted the future was about a month ago. I was driving down a highway towards my house when I suddenly had the thought, I'm going to get in an accident. Sure enough, a woman merged straight into my car. I know all this sounds completely crazy and fake, so does everyone I tell. But it's really true.
My BF goes to work about 15 minutes after I wake up. I was sitting in my recliner with my coffee and saw him walk by in his work clothes and go onto the bedroom. I said good morning, but he didn't respond. I figured he didn't hear me or was in a cranky mood. The next thing I know, he's coming back into the house because he forgot his phone. The bedroom is on the opposite side of the house of the front door, so he would have had to go by me to go back outside. Even if he had walked by without me noticing, it would have taken way longer than it did for him to walk by in the same direction twice. He was wearing a completely different outfit than what I saw him wearing just seconds before. I asked him if he was just in the bedroom and he said no. He was outside cleaning his car out a bit before work. We both got quiet and decided to check the bedroom, but no one was in there. Nothing looked different or messed with. It never happened again, but it really freaked me out. I'm not really into the paranormal, so it feels weird to talk about it.
I saw my father's doppelganger walk towards me on the May 26, 2013. I was on a school trip to Paris aged 17, at the top of the Pompidou Museum. At the roof by the restaurant there is, or certainly was, a long glass corridor that gave a great view over Paris. Out of nowhere, this guy who looked identical to my dad appeared, even wearing the same long black coat my dad used to wear. He walked down the corridor towards me, and then turned down the escalator. I took photos of him as he was walking, as it really struck me how similar he looked. We'll put them up next to one of my dad if I can find them, and showed my dad them when I got back. In May 2014, my dad died of a heart attack. Died on the 6th, buried the 28th. I truly believe that doppelganger was telling me I had a year left with my dad. I told people about it once and showed the photos, and they just got kind of spooked. I don't talk about it hugely, but I do think about it a lot.
This happened when I was 15, and I have a hard time trying to figure out if this actually happened or if it was a dream. I was sleeping in my room and vividly remember my mom's boyfriend coming into the room and proceeded to have fun with me, but for some reason I was paralyzed. I could speak or move. Now the really weird part is that when he was done I felt it, like the ejaculation. I was a virgin at the time, so I don't understand how I should know what that feels like, but everything felt so real. Granted, my mom's boyfriend was a creep, ended up molesting my younger sister after I moved out at 16 because he straight up decked me in the face while drunk. I still have a hard time with this to this day, and that happened over 15 years ago. I've only told my husband.
A few years ago I got into the wine with an old friend, visiting her in a flat that was unfamiliar to me. Woke up for a pee in the middle of the night and it was pitch black in her place. I struggled to recall the layout of the place and figured it was a straight shot down the hallway to the bathroom, and bathroom light switches are easy to find. So I fumbled down the hall and through the bathroom door. Feel around for the bathroom counter beside me. Nothing. Stretch out my arms for the walls or the door I just walked though. Nothing. No matter what I do with my arms, it's just empty space everywhere. Still drunk, I get pretty disoriented and can't find my way back out of the room. Finally my hand finds something solid. It's the tiny face of a sleeping child. The whole of it fits perfectly in my outstretched hand. A cry rises up in the darkness, then, "Mom, that's not very nice." A light comes on in the adjoining room, just enough for me to see the door I came through and make my escape back to the sofa bed, where I jump back in without my pee. As more lights come on and my friend tries to convince her 3-year-old she was only dreaming, I pretend the kid woke me up too and find the bathroom. No problem. I don't talk about this. I was about 8 or 9, and I was living in a small apartment with my mom and brother. They were out and I was home alone. It was a fairly nice neighborhood for Springdale, and there was a huge thunderstorm. I went outside to the porch, looked to the left, and watched the rain fall in a wave towards me. I wanted to play outside, so I left through the front of the building, and it was sunny with clear skies. It turned out that our apartment building was on the very edge of a thundercloud. I stood in the grass, half of me soaked, the other half dry. It was small, and funny, and weird. It's my own little piece of heaven. That one moment was so pure, it's nice to remember every now and then. I have a vivid memory of having the flu or something similar as a small child, maybe 4 to 6 years old, and during the course of the illness my vision went totally black for a few seconds, several times. The first time it happened I remember standing in the kitchen with my mother, helping her bake cookies. She was letting me pour the milk in, and suddenly, I couldn't see the bowl, and my mother, who tended towards histrionics anyway, freaking out, shouting at me to pour it in, and me wailing, "I can't." Next thing I know my vision is fine and she's holding me up like she thinks I'm dying and then. I don't know. She put me down, I guess. Obviously I did not tell her about the temporary blindness. Growing up in NC you have ample opportunity to see all kinds of weird things flying around in the sky, especially if you go towards the coast. All kinds of experimental aircraft. There have been some lights that me and my family saw dancing low over the highway that none of us had any clue what they were before they zoomed off or vanished. But those were shared experiences. At night. All that normal conspiracy theory the truth is out there stuff. The one sighting I had that really weirded me out was around a year after I got my driver's license. I was eastbound on Independence Boulevard in Charlotte, North Carolina in what was, back then, a sparsely developed area between the city proper and Matthews, North Carolina. While driving I noticed something strange floating over the trees to my right. I slowed down to take a look. It was unlike anything I have ever seen before. It was a geometric shape, grayish but shifting between soft gray and gunmetal. And it was shifting over itself, turning end over end very slowly and deliberately. It was not at cloud level, but instead not much higher than the trees. And it was moving east as well. Methodically. It didn't seem to have a set shape to it. Not believing what I was seeing, I turned around the first chance I got and turned around to see it again. And there it was. Still floating in the sky. Same direction. Same movement. Same nebulous geometric progression. Drove past it a third time. The same, but now smaller as it traveled further east. It looked like it was fading away or dissolving into the sky. Of course, this was before the era of everyone having cell phones with cameras, and I read no other reports about it. For years I was convinced that I had seen a UFO east of Charlotte floating lazily in broad daylight, and I only shared it with a few friends at the time who pretty much thought, "Oh no, here goes Asher again." I still don't have an adequate explanation for what I saw that day. I made a friend on the internet, and we were friends for 7 years. In college we were finally able to meet in person. The first time was actually an accident. I happened to be in a town about an hour away for something else. He was able to visit for a little, but I was in the town for a conference, so we cut it short. Spending time together was great. It felt like we'd been hanging out in person forever. So we decided that I would come up to visit his college for real after I graduated college. It was a bizarre summer in that I planned and paid for the vacation while staying at my mom and stepdad's place while they were out of town. I flew up to an airport that was an hour away. It was cheaper and he could pick me up. We hung out no problem the first few days, but one night he took me bar hopping. We ended up going to at least 4 bars. So we got really drunk. When we started walking back to his apartment at 3 in the morning, we ended up stopping to have a conversation. Just chatting. We started talking about how I had been taking Tai Chi and Taekwondo, and we started talking stuff. We drunkenly decided to go around. I don't remember how exactly it happened, but all of a sudden I'm being choked in a headlock, and I'm pinned to the ground. I tapped out. He ignored me. I tapped again. Still ignored. I was choking and he still was ignoring me. I didn't know what to do, and I remember I started biting him. I was desperate to get out. The next thing I know, I'm free and there's another guy wailing on my friend. I had to pull the other guy off. The other guy had a girlfriend who had her phone out, and I had to beg them not to call the police. We were both drunk off our asses and I was still catching my breath. But I had to convince them it was drunken shenanigans. Eventually I said something that convinced them, and they left. My friend stormed off, and then for like the next 30 minutes he yelled at me about how a girl shouldn't have to save him from a guy and that it's pathetic. I was too drunk to remember exactly what was said, but in short it was a lot more derogatory marks. He stormed off several more times throughout the night, and my drunken ass had to sprint after him because I couldn't remember where he lived and I couldn't afford to take a cab back to the airport an hour away. I was ready to leave my stuff and have him ship it to me. Another 2 hours later I've managed to get him to wander back to his place, but I had to walk behind him because he said he couldn't look or talk to me. 6 in the morning we finally made it back to his place. We were bruised and bloodied, and I saw an ugly side to someone I thought I knew. He still wouldn't talk to me, so I just packed my things and waited until I could leave that afternoon. When he came out of his room, he said he couldn't remember much of anything the previous night, but he had a split lip and some cuts, so he knew something happened. I had to tell him a retelling of the previous night, and he said that didn't sound like him. He laughed it off. Typing it up, it doesn't sound so bad, but I couldn't get over his attitude and total disregard for my safety. And the fact that he just wouldn't stop. I had to rely on the kindness of a stranger who may not have been able to save me if timing hadn't worked out. I never figured out where the aggression came from. It shattered my confidence in myself, and it sent me into a depression that was noticeable enough to have me sent to therapy. I never told my therapist. And I haven't spoken to him for 2 years. I've only told 2 people. When I was in high school I worked a part-time job washing dishes. Very small rural town out in the middle of nowhere. One night I was riding my bike home in the winter, and this car comes around the corner up ahead of me. I had this odd sensation like I knew there was something wrong even though nothing looked abnormal. I acted on that instinct and started to head for the curve and managed to hop my bike up off the road. At that same moment the driver had proceeded to speed up quite a bit and swerve to try and hit me. I remember landing my little bunny hop on the curve and seeing his car pass right where I had been a second earlier. He then stopped and looked in his rearview mirror, and at that moment I chose to just cut through a small trail he could not follow me down. A few months later that same guy was arrested by the highway patrol for trying to run people off the interstate at high speed. He would try and play chicken with other drivers by driving in their lanes. It was in our local papers, but I cannot seem to find the article online when I search now. He was not local either, just appeared out of nowhere trying to run people over. Preface: I am not a religious person, nor do I believe in ghosts. Just for the record. My grandmother and I were super close. Great relationship. As a kid/teen, I spent my time with her versus going out with my friends. Loved her to death. When I was 19, she died of stage 4 lung cancer after beating breast cancer in the 80s. It sucked hard. Anyway, we knew she was dying and hospice came to her home to take care of her. The morning she died, 2 to 3 a.m., we weren't notified until 8 a.m. as my grandfather wanted to spend time with her alone and to clean her up. Anyway, that morning around 7 a.m., I heard my brother come in my room, which was a regular thing. He always opened my door, used my mirror, and left. This morning was no different. I heard the door open, saw his figure, rolled over and went back to sleep. Except this time, he didn't close the door. When I got up, the door was wide open, which annoyed the heck out of me. So, around 8 a.m. we were notified she passed. Later that day, after things calmed down a bit, I yelled, not really, at my brother for leaving my door open. Something like, "Hey, you know, when you use my mirror, you need to shut my door. That's annoying." He looked at me and said, "What are you talking about? I didn't sleep here last night. I slept at John's friend house." My blood ran cold. I asked my mom to confirm, and indeed, he did. She was the one who dropped off/picked up. The thing is, though, we have 2 huge dogs and I'm certain they wouldn't let anyone in the home, so there's that. When I was in year 3, I was walking home from school when some bloke pulled up in an old banger and asked me if I had seen a pony around. I didn't recognize the fellow, but I politely told him I hadn't seen anything of the sort. He asked me if I'd be willing to help him look for one, said it had gotten loose from its paddock and was likely out towards the valley. I thought for a brief moment and quickly agreed to help him on his quest to find that lost pony. Well, we had a bit of a drive, and out in one of the meadows I spotted what looked to be a spotted pony gallivanting like its life were beer and skittles. I get out of the car and quietly approach the beast, while the farmer bloke goes to get his horsebox. The pony's very gentle, so I stand quietly with it and pats it until he returns. He puts a lead on it and it happily walks into the horsebox. The fellow asked if I wanted a ride to wherever I had been walking, but it was a nice sunny day, a rarity, and I told him I'd be fine to walk home. So off he went to wherever he came from, and I made my way home. If my mates knew I was one to just happily climb into cars and lorries at the promise of finding a lost pony, they'd think me mad. Fortunately for me, he was an actual rancher and not a pedophile. About 10 years ago I was at a party with a bunch of friends. I just finished a conversation with someone and decided to step out for a smoke. As soon as I got outside I got the overwhelming urge to walk down to the Quickie Mart at the end of the street. Got there and had no idea what I wanted, so I grabbed a drink and went to check out. The girl behind the counter smiled, rang me up, and asked if I wanted anything else. I said no, and she smiled and said, "You should get a scratch off." She was cute, so I said sure. She picked one out and handed it to me. I walked back to the party and completely forgot about the ticket. Flash forward a couple of days, I doing laundry and find the ticket in my jeans. Scratch it off. Won $50,000. When I was about 17, I was driving out of my neighborhood to go visit a friend. I was completely alone in my car. It was the middle of a summer day. I was a lead foot back then and I felt safe driving around my neighborhood that fast because I knew the streets so well. I turned right down a street I've been down many times, but as you go down it, towards the end of the street, there's a sharp left and then the street comes to an end and there's a stop sign. So I'm lead-footing down this street and I hear my dad's voice say very loudly, "Slow down. There's a kid in the street." It startled me so much I slammed on the brakes and was like, "Duck." So I came crawling around the sharp left turn bend and a kid around 12 years old was running out into the street after his skateboard. If I hadn't heard that voice next to me, I would have probably killed that kid. I came to the stop sign and I was shaking. Drove like an old person the rest of the day. My dad was at home with my mom. I think whatever it was came across as my dad's voice because he scared it out of me more than anyone in my house. So when he yelled, I listened. But that voice was my dad's. Told my dad about it and he just shrugged it off. He's a non-believer in anything paranormal and the unexplained. This is going to get buried, but if it helps even one person it will make it worthwhile. I won't go into the backstory, it's not important. If you have nightmares that you act out, go see a doctor and get a referral to a neurologist. You may have REM behavior disorder. It's horrible, frightening, and dangerous. People with RBD have been known to throw themselves and others out of windows, attack loved bed partners, or drive off in cars, all while asleep. There's a high correlation between RBD and eventual Parkinson's disorder. No one knows why yet. The good news is, it is very treatable with low-dose clonazepam. Think of it as a seatbelt for your brain.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.